All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're diving deep into the world of, well, a very special grape actually, Verdelho. It's one that we've had quite a few requests about, and I think it's safe to say both of us were pretty excited to get into this one. We've got some fantastic sources to really unpack it all.
Oh, absolutely. We've got articles detailing like the grape's history and its journey, how it's grown and how it's made into wine and also, the places it's ended up all around the globe. And we even have
Mhm.
some thoughts from a sommelier about the history and the potential for Verdelho. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one.
So I guess our mission today is to really go beyond just like the basic facts about Verdelho and figure out why, why people are so excited about it. Why is it considered like a treasure in the wine world?
Exactly. Let's see if we can uncover what makes this grape so special. So where do we even begin with this one? Maybe with its origins.
Yeah, the origin story. It all points to Madeira, right? This beautiful island in Portugal. And the name Verdelho might actually come from verde, the Portuguese word for green.
Oh, interesting. So maybe a reference to the color of the grapes themselves.
Could be the berries, or maybe the young shoots of the vine.
It's fascinating, though, how Verdelho seems to be so intertwined with the history of Madeira. Some local legends even suggest it's been there since the 15th century.
Yeah.
And it definitely gained admiration in European markets pretty early on. It was clearly a very important part of Madeira's winemaking from the very beginning.
And it wasn't content to just stay in Madeira, was it? It spread to other parts of Portugal too.
Oh, definitely. You see it on the mainland in places like the Douro and the Down regions. It even shows up in Vinho Verde, although maybe not as the star of the show there. But it does contribute that lovely acidity and freshness to blends.
Right, right. And then, of course, there's the Azores, specifically Pico Island,
Yeah.
where it often goes by the name Torrontés.
Ah, yes, Terrantes. What's amazing about the Açores is the volcanic soils.
Mm.
They really seem to give the wines from there this incredible vibrancy,
Hmm.
you know, lots of acidity and a really pronounced minerality.
It's really quite a journey, thinking about how this grape went from Madeira to all these other places, and it didn't stop there. It even traveled all the way to Australia.
Oh, that's right. It really took off in
Yeah.
Australia, especially in Western Australia, regions like the Swan Valley and Margaret River. And, in these warmer climates, it makes these really lovely aromatic wines with tons of like tropical fruit notes
Yeah.
to actually become quite popular there.
One of the things that struck me reading through these sources was the historical appreciation for Verdelho, especially in Madeira. Sailors and explorers taking it with them on those long sea voyages. It must have been a real prized possession back then.
I know. It's incredible to think about. I mean, it really makes you wonder, what did those wines actually taste like way back then? And what were the stories behind them? I mean, Verdelho has this amazing ability to stay fresh and maintain its unique flavors. So it would have been perfect for those long journeys. The fact that those early explorers and sailors loved it, it really says something about the grape.
It really speaks to its resilience and adaptability. It's
Yeah,
clearly a grape that can handle a whole range of environments and still make delicious wine. And I think that's something that really shines through as we get deeper into this discussion, right?
definitely. I mean, just look at the different places where Verdelho is grown.
Yeah.
Each region brings something unique to the table.
Yeah.
And that's what we call terroir, right? It's this intricate combination of soil and climate and really every little aspect of the environment where the grapes are grown. And all of that, gets translated into the final character of the wine.
Yeah, terroir is like the fingerprint of a place, captured in the wine. And that's something we see so clearly with Verdelho. So let's take Vino Verde as an example. Granitic soils, that Atlantic climate. What kind of Verdelho do we usually get from there?
Ah, Vinho Verde. You can expect something light and fresh and incredibly aromatic. Think citrus, lots of citrus, and delicate floral notes. It has this really vibrant acidity, and sometimes you even get a little bit of spritz. That subtle effervescence that Vinho Verde is known for. It's just so refreshing.
And then we have Madeira, which is, well, pretty much the opposite in terms of climate and soil, volcanic soils, and a subtropical climate. And that's where we see Verdelho in its fortified form, right?
That's right. Madeira is where Verdelho really shines in its fortified style. And, those wines, they have incredible aging potential. They develop these really complex aromas, dried fruit, nuts, spices, and they have this high acidity that gives them a really lovely structure. And of course, we have to mention the traditional aging methods in Madeira.
Right, the estufagem and Cantero.
Exactly. Estufagem involves heating the wine, which accelerates the aging process and gives the wine some of those cooked fruit flavors.
Yeah.
Cantero, though, that's the more traditional and I think often the more sought-after method. The wines are aged in these attics where the temperature fluctuates throughout the year, and that over time it creates this incredible complexity in the wines.
It's pretty amazing, how those aging techniques really shape the final character of the wines. And then we have the Açores, also volcanic soils, but, a more pronounced Atlantic influence. What kind of Verdelho do we typically see from there?
The Açores, they often have this really striking mineral character. You get those salty, almost saline notes that really reflect the island environment. It's a very unique expression of Verdelho.
And what about Australia, those warmer climates like Swan Valley and Margaret River? How does that influence the style of Verdelho?
Well, in Australia, you tend to get fuller-bodied white wines,
Yeah.
and they have these beautiful tropical fruit aromas,
Mm.
like ripe mango and passion fruit, sometimes even a little bit of honey, and they still have acidity, to balance things out. But it's usually a bit softer than what you find in the Atlantic-influenced regions.
And our sources even mention a couple of other regions that are experimenting with Verdelho, South Africa and Argentina.
Well, that's right. South Africa can produce some really nice Verdelhos with good body and those tropical fruit flavors again, but sometimes with a little touch of spice. Argentina, though, is, well, it's still pretty early days there.
It's really fascinating to see how Verdelho can make such different wines depending on where it's grown. I mean, we're seeing everything from those crisp and zesty Vinho Verdes to those rich and complex Madeiras, and it all comes back to the climate and the soil,
Miss it for a war. It does. I mean, the climate plays a huge role in shaping the acidity and the body of the wine. The cooler Atlantic climates tend to preserve that acidity, while warmer regions like Australia produce those fuller-bodied wines. And then you have the soil, which influences the minerality and the overall complexity of the wine, like those volcanic soils in the Açores and Madeira. They really give those wines a unique character.
It's really quite remarkable, how those factors can shape the final wine. Like you get those very specific sensory details, the salty tang in a Verdelho from the Açores, or the nutty character in a Madeira. It all comes back to the terroir.
It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? How the grape can really translate the essence of a place
Yeah.
into something we can taste and experience.
It really is. So we've talked about where Verdelho is grown and how the environment influences it. Now let's zoom in a little bit, and take a closer look at the vine itself. What are some of the key things that make a Verdelho vine? Well, a Verdelho vine.
Well, if we're talking about the appearance of the vine, its ampelography, the Verdelho vine usually has medium-sized leaves. They often have a five-sided shape, like a pentagon.
Mhm.
And the bunches of grapes themselves, they're also medium-sized. They're quite compact, and they tend to have this sort of cylindrical shape that tapers at the end. The berries, the grapes themselves, they're usually small to medium in size. They have this greenish-yellow color and a fairly thick skin.
Okay, so that's what the vine looks like. But what about its growth cycle? When does Verdelho typically ripen?
Verdelho is considered a mid to late ripening variety. So it takes its time, to reach full maturity. And this is actually a good thing because it allows those complex aromas to develop. And it also helps the grape to retain its acidity, which is one of its defining characteristics. And this is especially important in warmer climates where other grapes might lose their acidity as they ripen.
That makes sense. And what about how it's grown in the vineyard? Are there any particular techniques that growers use for Verdelho?
Oh, definitely. Vineyard management is super important, and it can vary a lot depending on the region and the style of wine that the grower is aiming for. For example, in Madeira, they often use a pruning technique called vara.
A var.
Yeah, basically they select longer canes and train them horizontally, to create shade. This is important because, well, Madeira has that subtropical climate, and the shade helps to protect the grapes from the intense sun. In other regions, though, they might use a technique called espalier.
Espalier.
Right. This is where the vines are trained vertically, up wires. This helps to maximize sun exposure, which is important in cooler climates.
So it's all about adapting to the specific conditions of each region.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the training system. In Madeira, they use that latada system, which is those high pergolas that the vines grow on. This provides even more protection from the sun and the humidity. In other regions, though, you're more likely to see vertical shoot positioning. This is a system where the shoots are trained upwards, along wires. And in some warmer areas, they might even use bush vines, where the vines are just allowed to grow freely without any support.
It's amazing how much thought and care goes into cultivating these vines.
It is, and it's not just about the structure of the vine either. Disease and pest control are also incredibly important. We saw in our sources that that Verdelho can be susceptible to things like mildew and oidium.
Yeah.
And in the Azores, they even have to deal with phylloxera. So growers need to be very vigilant, and use sustainable practices to protect their vines.
It's really a constant battle, isn't it? Keeping those vines healthy and productive.
It is, but it's all part of the process. And then once the grapes are healthy and ripe, there are even more techniques that growers can use to ensure the highest quality fruit. Things like yield management, canopy management, and water management.
Okay, so let's break those down a little bit. What exactly is yield management?
Yield management is all about controlling the amount of fruit that the vine produces. Sometimes growers will prune off some of the bunches early in the season to make sure that the remaining bunches have enough resources to develop properly. They might also thin the bunches, to remove some of the grapes so that the remaining grapes can grow larger and develop more flavor.
In canopy management.
That's about managing the leaves and shoots of the vine. Growers might remove some of the leaves to improve airflow and sunlight penetration into the canopy. This can help to prevent diseases and also to ensure that the grapes ripen evenly.
And water management. I imagine that's pretty important in some of those drier regions.
Well, absolutely. In places like Australia, water is a precious resource. So growers have to be very careful about how much they irrigate. Too much water can dilute the flavors of the grapes, but too little water can stress the vines and reduce the quality of the fruit.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the timing of the harvest. This is crucial. Growers have to decide when to pick the grapes based on the style of wine they want to make. If they want a fresh, zesty wine, they'll pick the grapes earlier when the acidity is still high. But if they want a richer, more complex wine, they might wait a little bit longer to let the grapes develop more sugar and flavor.
It's really a delicate balance, isn't it?
It is. And it requires a lot of experience and skill, but when it's done right, the results can be spectacular.
Okay, so the grapes are harvested, they're brought into the winery. What happens next? How is Verdelho actually made into wine?
Well, this is where things start to get really interesting because there's so many different approaches to making Verdelho wine. It really depends on the region and the style of wine that the winemaker is going for.
So where should we start? Let's talk about Madeira first, since that's where Verdelho has such a long history.
All right. So in Madeira, they use these very traditional methods that we've already mentioned, the estufagem and the cantero, and the fermentation process is often stopped early, by adding a neutral grape spirit to the wine. This is what gives Madeira its unique fortified style.
Fortified meaning?
Meaning that alcohol has been added to the wine, which increases its alcohol content and also helps to preserve it. And Madeira wines are often aged for many years, sometimes even decades.
So that's Madeira. What about Vinho Verde?
Vinho Verde is, it's all about freshness. So the grapes are typically harvested early, when they're still quite tart. And the fermentation takes place at cool temperatures in stainless steel tanks. This helps to preserve the bright fruit aromas and the crisp acidity of the wine. And sometimes they'll even leave a little bit of carbon dioxide in the wine, which gives it that slight spritz.
And what about other regions like the Azores and Australia? How do they typically make Verdelho wine?
Well, in those regions, you'll often see more modern winemaking techniques. They might use stainless steel tanks, but they also might use oak barrels. And they might experiment with different fermentation temperatures and yeast strains to create different styles of wine. And some winemakers will even use skin contact, where they leave the grape skins in contact with the juice for a period of time. This could give the wine more color, more tannin, and more complex flavors.
So all of these different approaches, they all lead to to a pretty amazing array of wine styles, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have everything from those light and refreshing Vinho Verdes to those rich and complex Madeiras, and everything in between.
Well, let's try to break down those styles a little bit. What are some of the key characteristics of each style?
All right. Well, as we said, Vinho Verde is known for its lightness and freshness. The wines are usually pale in color, and they have those aromas of citrus, green apple, and sometimes a little bit of herbal character. And they have that really zesty
A
acidity.
Madeira?
Madeira is a world unto itself. I mean, you have so many different styles of Madeira, but in general, they tend to be richer and more complex than other Verdelho wines, and they often have those aromas of dried fruit, nuts, spices, and caramel, and they can age for a very long time.
And what about the dry white wines made from Verdelho in other parts of the world, like Australia?
Well, those wines tend to be somewhere in between Vinho Verde and Madeira in terms of body and complexity. They often have aromas of tropical fruit like mango and passion fruit, and they can also have some floral and herbal notes. And they usually have good acidity, to keep things fresh.
And then we have those fortified Madeiras.
Ah, yes, those are something special. They range from medium sweet to sweet, and they have these incredibly rich and complex aromas of dried fruits, caramel, spices, and even chocolate, and they can age for many many years.
It's really amazing how much variety you can get from one grape.
It is,
Yeah.
and it all comes down to those choices that winemakers make: the fermentation temperature, the yeast strain, whether or not they use skin contact, the type of oak they use. All of those things can have a huge impact on the final wine.
So now let's talk about what these wines actually taste like. I mean, we've talked about aromas, but what about the overall sensory experience?
Well, one of the things that I think really defines Verdelho is its acidity. It usually has this really lively, refreshing acidity that gives the wines a real lift, and the aromas can range from those citrus and tropical fruit notes to more herbal and floral characters, and in some cases you'll get that mineral character. And as the wines age, they can develop even more complexity. Those aromas of dried fruit and spice and sometimes even nutty or toasty notes.
And those aromas, I mean, they're reflected in the flavors too, right?
Oh, for sure. But you also might get some other things happening on the palate. Like some Verdelhos can have a slight bitterness, especially the drier styles,
Yeah.
and that bitterness can actually be quite pleasant. It adds complexity to the wine, and then the texture of the wine can vary quite a bit too, from light and crisp to more full-bodied and even oily in some cases.
And again, it all comes back to the terroir and the winemaking, right?
Absolutely. I mean, those are the two key factors that shape the sensory profile of a Verdelho wine. Think about a Verdelho from the Azores. That salty minerality is a direct reflection of the volcanic soils and the proximity to the ocean. And then you have a Madeira. Those oxidative notes, those nutty and caramelized flavors, those are a result of the unique aging process that they use in Madeira. And then an Australian Verdelho, that bright tropical fruit character, that's a result of the warm climate and the ripeness of the grapes.
So many different expressions. It's really quite fascinating.
It is. And if you're interested in exploring the different styles of Verdelho, I do have a few tips for tasting them.
All right, let's know them.
Okay, so first of all, serving temperature is really important. Lighter styles like Vinho Verde, they should be served well chilled. But more complex styles like Madeira, they can be served a little bit warmer. And the type of glass you use can also make a difference. For aromatic white wines, I like to use a glass with a slightly smaller bowl. This helps to concentrate the aromas. But for richer styles, you might want to use a glass with a larger bowl. And most importantly, take your time. Swirl the wine in your glass, smell it, really pay attention to the aromas and the flavors. See if you can pick out those different layers of complexity.
And of course, we can't forget about food pairing. Where does Verdelho really shine on the dinner table?
Verdelho is a really versatile food wine. The lighter styles, like Vinho Verde, they go great with seafood, salads, and lighter dishes. The more structured styles, those with a bit more more body and complexity. They can handle richer dishes like grilled fish or even some white meats. And the sweeter styles like some Madeiras, they can be delicious with desserts.
Can you give us some specific examples?
Sure. So a Vinho Verde, that would be perfect with some grilled sardines or a simple salad with some fresh goat cheese.
Yeah.
A dry Verdelho from Australia that could go really well with some seared scallops or maybe a chicken tagine, and a sweet Madeira that would be a classic pairing with some pecan pie or a chocolate mousse.
It really is a versatile grape, isn't it?
It is, and one of the things that makes it so good with food is its acidity. That acidity helps to cut through richness and research the palate.
Okay, so we've talked about the wines themselves. Now let's talk about the places where they come from. What are the main denominations of origin? The DOs that include Verdelho.
Well, we've already talked about a few of them: Vinho Verde, Madeira, and the Azores. And each of those regions has its own specific regulations for how Verdelho wines can be made. For example, in Vinho Verde, the wines have to be made from grapes that are grown in the Vinho Verde region of Portugal, and they have to meet certain standards for acidity and alcohol content.
And Madeira.
Madeira has even stricter regulations. The wines have to be made from specific grape varieties, including Verdelho, and they have to be aged using those traditional methods that we talked about earlier. The estufagem and the cantero.
And Azores.
The Azores, well, they have their own unique set of regulations too. And you also find Verdelho grown in other parts of Portugal, like the Douro, but those regions don't have specific DOs for Verdelho.
And what about producers? Are there any specific producers or brands that listeners should look out for?
Oh yeah, there are tons of great Verdelho producers out there. In Vinho Verde, you could look for producers like Quinta do Solero or Anselmo Mendes. In Madeira, you have producers like Blandys, Barbado, and Enriques and Enriques. And in the Azores, there's Azores Wine Company.
Those are some great names. And what about those producer associations? The ones that work to promote Verdelho. What role do they play?
Those associations are really important. They do things like organize marketing campaigns and events to raise awareness of Verdelho, and they also work to educate consumers about the different styles of Verdelho wine.
So as we look to the future, what are some of the challenges and opportunities for Verdelho?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is climate change. As temperatures rise, it's becoming more and more difficult to grow grapes in some regions, and this is especially true for grapes like Verdelho that need a cool climate to retain their acidity. And then there's the issue of pests and diseases. As the climate changes, pests and diseases are becoming more widespread, and this can be a real problem for grape growers.
So climate change is a big one. What else?
Well, there's also the challenge of competition. The wine market is very competitive, and there are a lot of other white wines out there. So Verdelho producers need to find ways to stand out from the crowd.
So how are they doing that?
Well, one way is by focusing on quality. Making sure that they're producing the best possible wines, and another way is by telling the story of Verdelho, highlighting its history, its versatility, and its unique character.
And what about opportunity?
Oh, there are definitely opportunities out there for Verdelho. I mean, one opportunity is the growing popularity of white wines. More and more people are drinking white wine these days, and Verdelho is a great option because it's so versatile. It can be made in a wide range of styles. And it's also very food friendly. And then there's the growing interest in wines from lesser known regions. People are always looking for something new and interesting to try. And Verdelho is a great example of a wine that's both delicious and unique.
So it sounds like Verdelho has a bright future.
I think so. I mean, it's a grape with a long history and a lot of potential. And I think that more and more people are going to discover it in the years to come.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into Verdelho.
Sounds good.
So, as we've learned today, Verdelho is a grape with a with a fascinating history. It's grown in a variety of regions around the world, and it can be made into a wide range of wine styles, and it's delicious.
Absolutely.
So for our listeners, I encourage you to go out there and explore the world of Verdelho, see what all the fuss is about. Maybe you'll discover your new favorite wine.
And as you're exploring, think about the other lesser known grapes out there, the ones that might be hiding in plain sight. There's a whole world of wine out there waiting to be discovered.
A world of hidden treasures.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Verdelho. We hope you enjoyed it,
Thanks for having me.
and we'll see you next time on the deep dive.